In fact, on the day that it happened, belief in the resurrection of Jesus Christ did not produce a decrease of fear. It actually produced an increase in fear. In the Gospel of Mark, chapter 16, the woman see the empty tomb, and they're told by an angel that Jesus is risen and that they should go tell their disciples. And here is their response. Verse 8, Mark chapter 16. And they went out quickly, and they fled from the sepulchre, for they trembled and were amazed. Neither said they anything to any man, for they were afraid. And oh, by the way, for those that are textual criticists, that verse in Mark chapter 16, there's a legitimate argument that that's actually the very last verse in the Gospel of Mark. Now, it does have some verses after that, but it's written in a style and a language that is significantly different than all the other books of Mark. So there's a legitimate argument that that's actually the very last book, the very last verse in the Gospel of Mark. But the reaction of fear to the resurrection of Jesus Christ is not limited to Mark. As a matter of fact, if you go over to Luke chapter 24, verse 5, we're told that the empty tomb, verse 5, and as they were afraid and bowed down their faces to earth, and even after Jesus appeared to Peter and later came the disciples, it says in verse 37, but they were afraid and affrighted and supposed that they had seen a spirit. So we go over to the Gospel of John. And in fact, the Gospel of John says that even after some of the disciples had seen and believed that Jesus was risen, they were still hiding in a room behind locked doors. A great New Testament scholar by the name of N.T. Wright puts it like this: it's extremely strange and extremely interesting that at no stage do they, the gospel accounts of the resurrection of Christ, mention the future hope of Christians. In other words, not a single person on Easter Sunday responded to the resurrection of Jesus Christ by saying, "Ha, hooray, now my great existential problem of whether or not there's life after death has been solved. My wish for the afterlife has been granted. I have nothing to be afraid of now." Nobody responds that way on Easter Sunday. Later on in the New Testament, we see the idea that Jesus' resurrection means hope for us too. It's later on that we get these unforgettable words from the Apostle Peter, "O death, where is your victory? O grave, where is your sting?" It was later that that actually came about. But on that first day, that first Easter, they knew he was resurrected, and that meant that he was vindicated. And that meant that his teaching was true and that his identity was validated. And that meant that the movement wasn't over. But initially, on the first day, on the first Easter, that's all they knew. And for them, what it actually meant was more work. And we see this in the Gospel of Matthew, Matthew chapter 28, verse 8, where it says on the first day of the resurrection that the woman hurried away from the tomb afraid, yet filled with joy, and ran to tell the disciples. Joy because somehow he was alive, but afraid because this meant now, women, the Romans who just killed me, well, the movement hasn't stopped. You're at risk too. So Easter to the disciples actually meant they had more work to do. And we see this almost in a comical way. Down in verse 20, it says, Jesus said to Mary, after Jesus had come back, and he sees Mary Magdalene weeping at the tomb, and he comes on up and he says one word to her. He says, "Mary, Mary." And she turned to him and she says in Aramaic, she says, "Rabboni." And then Jesus says, "Don't touch me because I haven't yet ascended up to my Father." Now, I want you to think about this for just a second. She says, he comes to her, he says, "Mary." And she turns and she says, "Rabboni," which means master, teacher. And she goes to hug him and he says, whoa. Don't be so clingy, Mary. Nobody likes a clinger. Mary, you got work to do. Think about this, because Jesus says, "Go and tell the disciples." The church at this moment consists of one person, and it's Mary Magdalene. Go and tell, Mary. Go and tell the disciples. So she wanted to absorb Jesus, to be around Jesus, to suck every second she could out of Jesus. She just wanted to love on him and be loved by him. And he goes, no, we have work to do. So the resurrection on Easter Sunday, that day, it wasn't something that produced a whole lot of, oh, yeah, there's life after death. I feel really good. They didn't understand it that way. What they understood was they had work to do. What they understood was that the movement hadn't changed. What they understood was that their lives, the same people that killed Jesus, they'd be coming after them too. So that's what Easter Sunday actually meant 2,000 years ago. And it's unbelievable. So whatever you think of the gospel accounts of the resurrection of Jesus Christ, understand this. Whatever they were not a story of people getting their wishes for immortality fulfilled. They were a story of people who were stunned against all expectation with the conviction that Jesus was somehow alive. And the most logical reason that they believed that Jesus Christ was alive was that Jesus Christ was alive. So, the resurrection happened overnight. But their understanding of the resurrection didn't happen overnight. The initial message of the resurrection on Resurrection Day was not, Christ is risen, now you have immortality. The initial message of the resurrection was, Christ is risen. Now you have a quite dangerous and costly purpose. Now, meaning in human... Meaning is really, if you could allow me to get a little philosophical here, meaning is not optional to human beings. We all seek and desire meaning. What is my purpose in life? Why am I here? Does my life have meaning? And it's like spiritual gasoline. It helps when you can find purpose and meaning. It helps keep you going. Now meaning itself doesn't prove the existence of God. But you know what? In the same way that hunger doesn't prove the existence of food, yet it would be awfully weird to be created in a universe where hunger for something that didn't exist happened. Thirst doesn't prove the existence of water, but it would be pointless to live in a universe where we thirsted for something that wasn't. Meaning doesn't by itself prove an existence of God, but it would be so weird to be in a universe where we sought and desired and wanted meaning in a universe that didn't provide any. Nietzsche, the German philosopher, used to talk about Christians. Wasn't too complimentary of us. And when they asked him about the meaning of life, what he wrote about was, there was once a rock that spun around and around, and life developed on it, and they created knowledge. But soon, in a microsecond, in a nanosecond, it ceased to exist, and all the knowledge went away with them. That was his meaning of life. But Resurrection Day was something else, because on Resurrection Day, Jesus was able to show by his victory over the grave that actually, you know what? Your life actually means something. This dominant secular view of the day that we're just a random tissue in the accidental cosmos and in the nanosecond we cease to exist. But Jesus actually taught that life had meaning. And you know this is true because you were made by God and loved by God. And we hunger for food, and that doesn't prove food exists. We thirst water, that doesn't prove that water exists. We hunger for meaning, and it doesn't prove that meaning exists, but it would be strange to hunger for a meaning that was emerged in a meaningless universe. And this is what Jesus says. Your story has been fixed by setting it in God's larger story of love and grace and forgiveness. So Jesus proved a lot of controversy and provoked a lot of controversy, and eventually was crucified, and it looked like he was just one more clever little blob of tissue on a rock. And then came Sunday and the resurrection, and the rock got rolled away, and to their astonishment, his followers had to go back over everything that he said and did and taught to understand the meaning in a new light of this earth-shattering event. There's a movie, I don't know if y'all have seen it. It's called The Sixth Sense by Bruce Willis, right? Y'all familiar with that one? Sixth Sense? Okay, so Bruce Willis is this psychologist who is helping this very young boy deal with the concept of death. And so he's helping him find purpose and meaning behind death. And the thing that's weird about this little kid is that he could actually see dead people. And then at the end of the movie, what happens is we come to find out that Bruce Willis himself, the doctor that had been helping this young child find purpose and meaning in death, that Bruce Willis himself was dead. Mind blown, face melted. Because it kind of shed new light on everything that had been said. So then you go back and you watch the movie again and you find so much more deeper meaning in everything that is said throughout the movie. It was the same way with the disciples. Once they lived with Jesus for 3 years and then Jesus dies and he raised again on Sunday, they go back over everything that he had been teaching and teaching and teaching over these 3 years, and they see something that's so much more meaningful in the words that he said. Same way with Jesus. Everything took on a new light. So we go back and we look at the things that Jesus did and Jesus said over his 3 years. We find that new purpose. We find that new life. And after the resurrection, when we look at it, that means that the cross took on a completely different meaning. Because on Friday, what the cross was it is an instrument of Roman torture that took Jesus away from us. And on Friday, that's all the cross was. And on Saturday, when God was silent and nothing had happened and Jesus lay dead in the tomb and there were no answers, the cross, it still meant it was an instrument of Roman torture. It was the end of all their hopes and their dreams, and it had no meaning other than that. But on Sunday, when Jesus raised again and was resurrected, the cross took on an entirely new meaning. And now, the cross is one of the most, if not the most, inspirational symbols in the entire world, and Jesus knew that it would be like that. On Sunday, believers in Jesus Christ can see the world in a different light. Believers in Jesus Christ. Now, as children of God, God has his children among every nation, kindred, and tongue, people that have not believed yet, but they are still his children. And so as a gospel preacher, what we do, and as a gospel church, what we do is we take the message of Jesus Christ and we show his children who are born again and heaven bound. We show them a resurrection message so that they can look at their life, they can look at their situation, and they can see it differently because they serve a really big God. And when we look at the resurrection message of Jesus Christ and we look at all the things that he said and all the things that he did, and then when we read in the book of Hebrews that, he sat down at the right hand of God because he hath perfected forever them that are sanctified. It takes on an entirely new and more powerful meaning. And then when we go up against our own personal struggles, whether it be with our children or whether it be the struggles that we're having with our parents, whether it be the financial situation or the job that we have, and we look at it through the resurrection power of Jesus Christ, everything takes on a new meaning because we have a God who can not only handle our problem, but we have a God who can handle the ultimate problem of death itself, and that nothing is beyond the power of our God. And then we look at the love of Jesus Christ that would compel him to do something like that, like go to the cross for people who were unworthy. Because scriptures say that there's none righteous, no, not one. There's none that doeth good. The poison of asps is upon our lips. We are altogether unprofitable. And we look at the man Jesus Christ who would die for such a people as this, and we say, oh my goodness, the love of God. It's an empowering, invigorating love. And so then, I want to go finally to John chapter 21 because we come to it, because on Resurrection Sunday, we have meaning. Because Jesus wasn't a victim, Jesus was a victor. Love wasn't defeated, love won. On Sunday, the tomb was empty. The cross was filled not as a Roman instrument of torture, but the cross is filled with grace and beauty and forgiveness and power, such that it has become by far the most inspiring symbol in all of the universe. And so we see in 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 3, and what this means for us is that we're not just some clever little blob of tissue waiting for our star to freeze. And this is what Peter wrote. Peter says in 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 3, "Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, which according to his abundant mercy hath begotten us again unto a lively hope by the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead." That first day, Peter was confused. That first day, Peter hid. That first day, Peter went a-fishing, back to his lifestyle. That first day when the resurrection morning came, it didn't solve the existential crisis of is there life after death. That first day, it produced fear. But when Peter started to study the resurrection, and Peter started to think about all the teachings that Jesus done over those 3-year periods, Peter can't help it. Peter changes. Peter gets together with John, and they go into the temple, and all of a sudden they're empowered because there was work for the church to do. And later in his life, when Peter was writing to his people, he was saying, talking about the resurrection of Jesus Christ, that Christ hath begotten us again unto a lively hope. So it's not just some ephemeral thing, some thing out there that this hope is not based on. It is a lively, living hope which can affect you today. But I want you to notice something, that Jesus Christ hath begotten us again. If you are one of God's children, it is because Jesus hath begotten you. It's not something you did. It's not something you earned. It's not some prayer that you said. It's because Jesus took active steps to birth you into the kingdom. Hallelujah. That's what the resurrection means. That Jesus conquered death, that Jesus, through that same power, has begotten you again, and he's begotten you to a lively hope. So the resurrection message is not one and done. The resurrection message is a living hope. It's something that's applicable today, that should guide and guard and compel us in every single thing we do. Let's look at how the resurrection kind of shows itself in the final passage of John, in John chapter 21. In John chapter 21, Jesus has been resurrected. The disciples initially, as we talked about, were afraid and feared. And they were walking and fishing and struggling, and things were hard on them. So Jesus comes on up to the seashore, and there's like, how are things going? We've struggled all night. And he says, cast your net on the other side. And they cast it up. They bring up 153 fish. And then they come to the shore. And this is what it says in John chapter 21, verse 8. Forgive me, but I'm going to paraphrase. John chapter 21, verse 8. After they have been struggling and fishing, and then they do what the Lord says, and they catch the fish, when they get to the shore, Jesus was cooking fish. I was reading that account this week, and it just hit me. Have you ever done that? Like you're just reading something fresh, and then you just see something you never really seen before? So the resurrected Jesus comes, and he provides what the disciples had been working for all night long. They were trying to catch some fish, presumably so they could eat some fish, and Jesus already had the fish prepared and cooking when they got there. I love grace. I need grace. You know, everything I need in my life and everything I'm looking for, Jesus has provided. Do you know, as a born-again child of God, heaven's secure. But you're not just born again to go to heaven, and Christianity is not about passing some sort of litmus test. The test has already been taken. You've already passed. What being a Christian and a follower of Jesus Christ means is that today, I get to experience God in this moment. Today. Right now. And today, right now, as I struggle, I get to experience God in this moment, and Jesus provides what I'm looking for. Right now, if I'm afraid, maybe it's a financial situation. Right now, if I'm afraid, maybe it's because of a medical situation of a family member that I'm dealing with. Right now, if I'm lonely, let me tell you something. Jesus provides. He provides comfort for the lonely. He provides comfort for the hurting. He provides help for those that are needing. He says, ask and it shall be given, seek and you shall find, knock and the door will be open to you. So on Resurrection Sunday, on an Easter Sunday, when we are looking, when we are hurting, when we're wanting, the answer is found in Jesus Christ. And the cross of Christ is more than just a symbol. The cross of Christ is everything and every reason of hope that we have. And it's not just a hope in the hereafter, it is a lively hope for today. So I want y'all to do something with me this week. And we've done it sporadically, but I'm just particularly compelled to ask you to do it on Easter Sunday 2021. Like the game Where's Waldo, where you find Waldo in the crowd. Or in Highlights magazine that you go to in the dentist's office and you find those hidden little figures. Why don't we, this week, have an exercise, it's a spiritual exercise of finding God in the moment. Because He's around us, thanks to the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And I want you to know and make the connection as we come to a conclusion that the resurrection inspired fear. But then it brought great comfort. And as they grew in their knowledge about what Jesus had said and about the cross, they understood more and more that Jesus is about today. That Jesus is about tomorrow. And that Jesus is about our future too. So we know about heaven. I'm afraid of tomorrow, but if I will invite Jesus in, that's going to take care of itself because nothing that really matters is at stake. And right now, as I sit in a pew or I listen online and I invite Him into today, into this moment, our God who occupies time and space, our God, I mean, He curls galaxies. Our God does tricep extensions with the universe. We have a powerful, powerful God. And whatever you're going through right now, by the resurrection of Jesus Christ, He can take over and He can take care of it. I got a grandbaby that's going to be coming in just a couple of months, and I'm so excited about that, to hold that little bundle of joy in my hands. That's going to be pretty exciting. But what's even more exciting for me is that little bundle of joy, her future is in the hands of an all-loving God. And not just that little bundle of joy, but Rich mentioned my pop. And Pop's going to be going home pretty soon. And you know what? That's okay. Because of the resurrection power of Jesus Christ. And Nana, she's going to be alone. But it's going to be okay. Because of the resurrection power of Jesus Christ. I don't know what your problem is, but I know we all have them. And I just want to encourage you. We have a lively hope because of the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Don't listen to the counterculture. Don't listen to the other messages. Because you have Jesus, because He freely gave Himself for you. If you would, let's turn to hymn number 140. We'll sing the first.